it was shock because I found a lump. I was leaning over a desk at work one day, felt down, there's a lump there, and I just ignored it. It's my wife made me go. She happens to be a radiographer, so she actually knows about these things. So it probably sent some alarm bells ringing with her. And finally, it was a case if I didn't go, she would have dragged me down there by my hair. I mean, at that time I had hair. So it went along, he examined me, and that's part of the problem is, you're going to have to drop your slide, slap it on the table, you'll be prodded and poked. So I went along and he said, I don't think it's anything to worry about, it's probably a cyst. He said, importantly, he said, we'll get it checked out. So he referred me on to a surgeon, because it was painful. So I went along and saw the surgeon, and he said the same thing. He said, I don't think it's anything to worry about, it's probably a cyst, but we're getting an ultrasound scan done, and that should confirm it. So I went back the next day, had the ultrasound scan. She didn't say anything, obviously it's not her job to say, and I said, is everything okay? And she went, yes. So I was going along thinking, yeah, it's fine, it's just a cyst. And I went back the following day to see him, and I can actually picture it now, walking in to that room, that consulting room, and he was sitting at a desk, there was a nurse with him. I can picture it like yesterday, and he looked up and it was quite abrupt. I suppose that's why I prefer it really. He says, got some bad news for you, unfortunately it's not a cyst, it's cancerous. And the problem was I was on my own, I wasn't prepared for that, and that without doubt is the worst moment of my life ever. Even when later on things got worse, that was still the worst moment. Going along, I've never been ill other than a few sporting injuries, never been in hospital. Next thing is the big C, it's the big C word, I've got cancer. Straight away I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm dying, how long have I got? And for me, what made it doubly worse, it was the two extremes, was that the previous week my wife found out she was pregnant with our second son. So you're on a high. That was one Monday, then the following Monday I've been told I've got cancer, and it was horrible. Next thing I know, I'm having blood tests done, x-rays done. I was numb, I was in shock. What they was talking to me, I can't remember what they said, and I actually can't remember driving home. Somehow I got home, walked in through the door, and obviously I was white as a sheet, and my wife said to me, she said, what's the matter? I said, Brit dramatic. I said, I've got cancer, I'm dying. Well, that's how I thought it was. I knew there was such thing as testicular cancer, but I didn't know if it was serious, not serious. So yeah, that was the worst moment of my life.
Shock. Utter shock. I didn't even know that testicular cancer existed. So that just hit me between the eyes, frankly. So, it was thereafter that when it was explained to me what the process would be, that I began to understand. But even then, in the doctor's office, I showed no emotion. I know I didn't. But about 5 minutes after I walked out, I just collapsed. Mentally, lost it. So,
how old were you?
35.
What were your feelings like when you left the surgery then? Just trying to describe it.
I was extremely scared because my dad had cancer more than once, and I'd seen him go through it. And I knew what it had done to him because he was considerably older than me when he got cancer. He was in his 50s. And the second lot of cancer caused him to stop work. And at that point, he literally sat down and waited to die. It was just the fear, first of all, that I was going to die, and secondly, that if I didn't die, I was going to end up like him at 35. And it nearly happened.
When I was first diagnosed, anyone who's seen the film will see the scene where Jack gets told, and that's me. Because I was rubbish. I went completely blank. just like no feelings whatsoever. And I sat there, and I thought, I should say something. This is a big dramatic moment in my life. I should say something. So I went, good heavens, cancer. Well, I never. Goodness, woo, cancer. And this little voice in the back of my head said, you're rubbish. You know, this is a big dramatic moment of your life and you can't play the part of yourself being told you've had cancer. It was a complete out-of-body thing. And I was like that all the way through it. I cried once when the consultant said something that made me think they might take the wrong one. He actually said at the end of my interview, oh, you will keep reminding us which one we're taking, won't you? And I was like, but I'm going to be asleep. So I didn't know then that they draw on you. So I actually cried then, but the rest of the time I was just blank and making jokes and finding everything really interesting. So yeah, when I was first diagnosed, there was no big burst of tears, no anger, no anything, just completely blank.
Shock, disbelief, anger, and then I think very quickly probably a bit of relief, which might sound a bit strange, but I think that, you know, knowing what I had, it then become an opportunity to then be able to deal with it.
Yeah.
So and I think the relief sort of took over quite quickly.
So I told you were sick for a little bit before then. Before you found out?
I mean, I just became ill. Became ill, went to the doctors. They had diagnosed me as having pleurisy, gave me antibiotics, and then 10 days later, still didn't feel right. And then it sort of started a sequence of events, going back to the doctor, and then very quickly being told that it was something more serious.
Yeah.
And then I think over a week having loads of different tests, and then pretty much then being diagnosed with cancer, and being told it was testicular cancer.
Well, I've been through testicular cancer twice. First time I had it, I thought I'm going to die. I didn't know I was ahead of me. I had no idea what this operation would involve or any further treatment, or if I'd be able to have any kids after this, or even if I would still be alive. But obviously I'm still here. That's all good. Had children back in 2008, a good 8 years after my operation, and I made a full recovery. However, in 2014, I had testicular cancer in the remaining testicle, and basically I knew what was coming. I knew what the operation would involve. I knew I was going to survive, and I knew where the support was.
Well, I wasn't actually diagnosed with cancer for over a year and a half. I actually suspected something was wrong down below. Took myself off to the GP, and he pretty much ignored me, didn't really want to check me, and I was saying, please check me, you know. He said, no, at your age there's no problem, and I was the key age, target age for it. And I literally went back and I saw a urologist, and they were like, oh, we think might be something's wrong. It was actually at a sexual health clinic. Maybe something's wrong, maybe something isn't. At that stage they should have referred me for an ultrasound very quickly.
Yeah.
They didn't. So a year and a half passed by, and I developed a cough which would not go away for at least 3 months. It just was with me for that amount of time. So I went off to the doctors with the cough, and he just prescribed me antibiotics. For a week I took those religiously and decided that I would take myself off to A&E for a chest x-ray, because I knew that there was something seriously wrong with my lungs at that time. Any other pains or symptoms had long subsided. So I took myself off to A&E, insisted that I have a chest x-ray, said I'm not leaving here until you get a chest x-ray. They reluctantly gave me a chest x-ray, and after that time it was non-stop. They saw what they called shadows on my lungs, and the A&E doctor that had to tell me that I had these dark patches on my lungs was so nervous. He said to me, would you like a drink of water? And he actually came in shaking and he spilt the water that was for me all over his computer keyboard, you know, and I'll never forget that, you know, and that's when he was telling me that they found some dark patches on my lungs, and I said, okay, what's the percentage chance that it's an infection? And he said 20, and I said, okay, I'm not stupid, what's the other 80%? He said, it's cancer. So that's the time I was, you know, shock and disbelief, as with most people at that time, and then it was just a roller coaster from there on in.
That's easy, really. Put it into 3 categories. Firstly, probably most importantly, is my wife. She treats cancer patients, so she's dealing with it. But it was support she gave me. You got someone to talk to. How I coped with it was really humour. I didn't take it seriously. I was always doing practical jokes on people and things like that. When I lost my hair, I went to a do at my golf club and wore a really bad wig and wanted to see how people react to me. Actually, it's just the way I cope with it. So certainly my wife. Secondly, it's the guy who treated me, Professor Tim Oliver at Barts Hospital. I was so lucky. Anyone else, I wouldn't be speaking to you now, I'd have been dead. He, even when it got really bad, when it spread, I ended up going to my abdomen, pelvis and lungs, and at one stage I was literally had maybe 2 months to live. He never gave up on me. So without doubt, him, and thirdly, friends and family, the support you get. But I think that applies to everyone, really. I'm lucky. I was married. I had a young family. I think it's a lot. It is a young man's disease, and I think it'd be a lot harder for someone to cope with. So if you're a teenager, you're single. How do you speak to your mum and dad about things like that? I think it's a lot harder if you're younger. For me, I had a wife, so I had someone to speak to, and also friends as well.
That's a really interesting question. I think as a bizarre answer too, a suicide attempt helped me more than anything else, because it was unusual. My case was unusual, very unusual, in that instead of, like most guys, having a single testicle with cancer in it, I had both. I don't do things by halves. And such was the attitude towards hormones at the time in men that I was left without them for 2 months. And in that time, I can only describe it as losing my mind completely. I was a completely different person, and I knew I was, but I couldn't do anything about it. So, people have asked me previously, what was it like when you had no hormones? And the only thing I can draw an analogy with is when a woman has premenstrual tension, but instead of it lasting a couple of days, it's 24/7 for the entire period. And so you go mad, literally. That's what caused the suicide attempt.
And so, what did that give you a realisation that actually life was worth living, or did it get you more help than you'd had before? Was it something that the doctors suddenly took you more seriously?
No, the doctor. I was due for radiotherapy, and I went into the hospital for the radiotherapy the day before to meet the radiologist, and he said, "Is there anything I can do for you?" And I replied, "Well, if you don't get me to see a hormone doctor really quickly, we'll forget about radiotherapy because I don't want to live." And the following day, I got to see a hormone doctor.
That's changed your outlook. What was it like suddenly getting your hormones back?
It was a relief in one sense, although again the state of the treatment at that stage wasn't really well thought out, and I was given an injection that actually lasted 2 weeks, and I was told it would last for 4. And when I went back and said, "Look, this isn't working, I'm going crazy again in the second 2 weeks. Can we reduce the interval? He said no.
So what or who do you think actually has helped you the most since you were actually diagnosed?
Well, NHS, I mean, the Chelsea and Westminster Hospital have been fantastic. I see them every year. I've got another checkup in a couple of weeks. It was every 2 weeks, then every month, then every 3 months, then every 6 months. And then for the last 6 or 7 years, it's been every year. And every year I go, I think they're going to say this is the last time, and they never do. They say, yeah, come back next year. And that reassurance every year is lovely. So they've helped. And all the people who worked around the operation and the nurses, and yeah, no quibbles, whatever, with any of them. My family were great, my friends were great. None of which surprises me because I've got good friends and a good family. The thing that surprised me was how well, was what I brought to it. That if you'd said to me, you're going to be diagnosed with cancer, how would you feel? I would imagine myself this kind of weeping mess sitting in a dark room, you know, thinking my life was over. And I just kind of found everything really interesting. I found everything really funny and just got on with it. And I thought, who the hell is this person? I don't recognise this person who just gets on with it.
Well, I think at the time the support of the family, looking back, the support of the family, you know, having that kind of, you know, that they were going to be there, that they were so strong, you know, you kind of expect when there's bad news for sometimes people close to you to react, and the reaction was very much that, you know, we're in this together, that, you know, we're going to beat this, you know, we're going to come through it. Mm-hmm. So the family initially is a big support, and then you know, you realise you've got a very close network of friends, which obviously help. And then the support, which was with Orchid, because you know, meeting Colin and then, you know, realising that there's other people that have gone through it, because at the time you think that you're the only, you think that, you know, you're the minority, and you realise that there's, you know, people constantly that are in the same position that have come through it. Yeah. And I think that, you know, learning the stories, hearing people, hearing success stories, you know, that gives you a very good you know, feeling that you are going to be able to come through it, and you've got that support from people that you've never met before as well.
First, mainly my family, Corinne, my fiance, and our kids, Sam and Bethany Wakefield. My parents, brother and sister, and checkhamlads.com, Testicular Cancer charity.
During my treatment, I decided to write a diary, which was online. I was being bombarded with messages of good wishes and, you know, asking how I am, what's happening, what's happened to you, and you just can't, as much as you like to get back to every single one of your friends, you don't have the energy or the time to do it, because there's just such an influx of information coming in that you've got to answer, and you've pretty much got to tell the same story to every single person. Yeah. So I decided to make an online diary. And then say, look, if you want to keep up to date with what's happening, please go and visit that. So every day I was updating that 2 or 3 times, 3 or 4 paragraphs at a time. You know, I've just seen a doctor, I've just done this, I've just had a blood test, and I charted the whole thing, and it became somewhat of an obsession. I was putting my X-rays on there, my CT scans on there, pictures, all my blood test results, everything. Even the doctors were starting to use my website. Right. So it's quite something, and it still to this day exists on the internet, and it helps many people. You know, it's an inspirational story.
Can we ask you what the website is?
Yeah, it's timstollery.com, my name. So you just go along to there and you can read the whole story from start to finish. One of the people who helped me a great deal was an old, very, very old school friend of mine who I've known pretty much all my life and still do to this day. He's my best mate, Ken Clark. He was there, he was living with me at the time, and he just spent every single day with me at the hospital. You know, really, really lent on a mate, and that was when he came to the fore to help. It was a real, you know, it's great having someone there who's outside of the bubble to listen and then digest, because you can't really take it all in, what's happening to you. When it's happening to you, you can't take it all in. You need someone beside you, whoever that might be, just to help you with structure your questions or to analyse it afterwards, because you just can't take it all in at that moment.
The worst part of it wasn't the actual disease. It was the treatment, because so I was diagnosed with it. I was quite late being diagnosed. The prof thought that I probably had the disease for about 6 months before I was picked up. So unfortunately it spread to my abdomen, pelvis and lungs. I had the standard treatment. I actually went in remission, but it was only for about 3 weeks, then it came back with vengeance. Your treatment, when you start, you say your fitness level is 100%, you go in and have chemotherapy. My treatment was chemotherapy and surgery. So you go in, you have the standard course of chemo, and it drops down to 80%, then you've got a week, maybe 2 weeks off to recover, so it's up to 90%. Then you have the next lot, and you're down to 70%. So you're on a gradual slide, and my treatment lasted 18 months, so towards the end, I was really ill. Then you get all the side effects with the treatment. Yeah, okay, you lose your hair. For me, it didn't really bother me. The way I looked at it, I saved myself a few quid. I didn't have to have my hair cut, and I didn't have to shave. And if anyone knows me, I don't like shaving that much. So that wasn't an issue for me. It might be an issue for other guys, but for me, and also I think it's more of a problem for women. But it was the side effects. Probably the lowest point, I had to have a bone marrow transplant, so I was in an isolation unit, and the worst point, I had a stroke in there, and this happened, it was about 3 o'clock in the morning, and all of a sudden I started to slur my speech, which I normally do on a Saturday night anyway. But it's really weird because you can't get out what you want to say. Your mind is as sharp as ever, but the words are not coming out, and then your hands started going a bit funny. So I had a rough idea what was going on. And you know it's serious, at 3 o'clock in the morning you have an emergency brain scan done. That was the worst moment, and I think, God, how worse can it get? You know, I've got cancer and I've got everything, I know I have a bloody stroke. And I'm thinking, am I going to be out? Because I couldn't talk. I had to have a speech therapist coming in. It was quite a mild stroke compared to people and stories you read. But for me at the time, I would say that was because I just had enough by then. And it was the sickness and everything, because you're having a bone marrow transplant. It's a really, really high dose of chemo, so I couldn't control the sickness. I got Clostridium, the bug. It was just one thing, but that was probably the worst. That was the lowest point, actually having a stroke and not being able to speak. And I wouldn't talk. I just wouldn't talk to anyone. I just wanted to write things down, and they said, no, you've got to talk. And that's when they got the speech therapist in, that helped. I can remember the words I couldn't say. I couldn't say gorilla, flamingo, and banana. I really struggled with those. Obviously I'm not too bad now, but that was the worst part.
Ignorance. Really, in a word, complete ignorance, not only on my side, but also on the people who are supposed to be helping me. The surgeon, it was just an offhand comment, oh, you'll get hormones sometime. And then the response of the endocrinologist, it was more by the book, this is a 4-weekly injection, whether you've got 1 testicle, 2 or none. And that, of course, as anybody would think logically, doesn't really make sense. And so my response to that, once I got over being angry at not managing to commit suicide, was that I had the wit and the will to do something about it. And so that, in and of itself, became my mission in life. I've been utterly dedicated to getting awareness out, changing what's wrong about the hormones and the way that they're dealt with. There's still an awful long way to go, but we are making headway.
In a way, the only worst moment was that moment when the doctor said, we might take the wrong one, so you have to keep telling us. I think it was meant to be funny, but it wasn't. But I didn't ever have a really scary moment. The only moment that was bad was nothing to do with the cancer, and that was that when I had my operation, the A&E department was overflowing, so I had 2 people coming down from heroin highs in the ward screaming in the middle of the night for toast. So this really, really thin guy going, "Get me some Addy toast, nurse!" And I'm like, thinking, I can't move. I had this operation, I didn't realise how mobile or anything. And so this guy screaming. And then this other guy was in a wheelchair and a heavy smoker. So he got a mate to push him outside so they could have a cigarette. When he got back, this doctor was waiting for him. He said, "Are you outside smoking, Mr. So-and-so?" He said, "Yes. If you keep on smoking, we'll cut those legs off because they are diseased, and you keep smoking, they won't get any better." And they were all just screaming their heads off, and I'm lying in bed thinking, actually, this is a bit like a nightmare, because I've had this operation, I can't go anywhere, can't run away, and there's all these screaming people. But that really had nothing to do with the cancer. That was the bad moment.
Probably the treatment.
Yeah.
The treatment, I think if I had to single out, I think the treatment was so intense because of that it had spread, so there was really sort of no time to lose. Just feeling every day, feeling like it was just a mountain to climb, and the side effects of the treatment, that certainly was the hardest point at the time. Absolutely, yeah.
The worst aspect, I think, was the operation, the first time round, because I didn't know what was coming, I didn't know what was ahead. Obviously, it was a bit easier the second time round. I knew what was coming, both physically and emotionally.
During the chemotherapy, towards the latter stages of the chemotherapy, I was probably in treatment for chemotherapy treatment for about 4 months, and it was very intense, and they do it in cycles. And by the end of the end of the 3rd cycle, I was starting to become very poorly. My immune system was very low, hair had fallen out, sickness, smells were bothering me, particular smells. So I'd have to take in an air freshener to the hospital just to go to the toilet, because I couldn't stand the smell of the toilet paper. It was really weird, things like that. My appetite was quite good, but the worst aspect of the chemo was probably the constant, blood tests and needles to give you these chemicals intravenously into your veins. Sometimes quite painful. I lost a couple of veins through the treatment. Then I had to have blood transfusions because my immune system was so low, and they have to get you to a certain level of health before they can treat you. Because you're constantly being knocked down. They're literally killing you to kill the cancer, and the cancer flatlines hopefully before you do, and then they let you recover. But each time they hit you, you're going lower and lower and closer and closer. But then they leave you to recover, and then they hit you again and then leave you to recover, but you don't recover. The cancer doesn't recover as quickly as you do.
Totally. Yeah. It's probably, in some ways you say it's probably the best thing that's ever happened to me. My whole outlook on life, I think sometimes you lose value on things. You take things for granted. And sometimes when something maybe looks like it's being taken away from you, it makes you value it more. You get into a rut, it's the same thing, but it certainly made me value. I wanted to see my children grow up. That was probably one of the I wasn't ready. I think I'm too young to die. I was 32 when I was diagnosed. I had 2 young boys. I mean, they drive me around the twist now, and I can't wait to get rid of them. Hopefully, one's leaving in 6 months. He's getting his own place. But at the time, they was what one was a baby, the other one was 4, and I wanted to see them grow up. So that was really important to me. My whole outlook, things I've done. Obviously involved with fundraising, which is very important to me, and some of the fundraising things that I've done that I would never have dreamed on, and through the charity, people I met, and that's really some of the people I've met who have now become friends. You said to me, 20 years ago, you would be friends with this person, that person, you would get to know this. I've never in a million years. So without that, it has changed my life completely. I like to think from the better. So you could say, actually, it was probably a good thing in quite surreal sort of way of saying it, but it has changed my outlook on life. It makes you value it more, and there's not enough hours in the day for me. And some of the things that I've done, and like fundraising things that I've done, and I would never dream to doing that, and people I've met. So it has had a really dramatic input, and my whole life changed. So I like to think for the better.
Oh yeah. I think, prior to getting cancer, I suppose I should explain that in my opinion, and I think it's valid, I had hormone problems as a child. And as a result, I was the runt of the litter, so to speak. And my dad was in the army, and bless him, he wanted his son to have an education that he was never afforded. And so therefore I was sent to a military boarding school at the age of 11. And being the runt of the litter and also quite lippy, I quickly became a target. And I endured 5 years solid of abuse. First of all physical, but then it degenerated into sexual abuse. And so I was very confused when I left school. I didn't know whether I was gay or not. You're not going to cry, are you? Okay. I resolved that issue, but the anger remained, of course, and it stayed with me even through the cancer and out the other side. And it wasn't until I was 50 that I began to understand the effects of that early abuse had on me and my mind, and was able to do something about it. Once I understood that, I was then able to, instead of sabotaging every aspect of my life, which I was pretty good at, I was then able to actually focus on something that was really important to me, and continue through with it until I became satisfied and actually quite well known for the work I do in support of men who've had testicular cancer, and also men who've got hormone problems. They're two separate things.
Looking at the charity work you do and the work with awareness, it seems to be that it almost takes somebody to have testicular cancer to start taking things seriously.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because us men, and I think it is exclusive to men in many respects, we are unlike ladies in as much as we don't get the same kind of education from our parents, because girls, of course, suddenly have periods, and then this conversation obviously between mum and daughter takes place, and so the child then feels empowered and can discuss it, not because all her friends will have had that conversation too, and so it becomes a topic of conversation in the teens, whereas boys, I remember asking my mum why it was I hadn't reached puberty by the age of 16. And she said, well, it's all right, you're a little bit late. Your uncles were like that. And, bless her, that's all she knew. But the fact of the matter is, of course, that I had a genetic problem. And it's clear which direction it came from. Because of that, I think when us boys, particularly if they've been abused, we build this this shell around ourselves, and we purport to be someone we're really not, and display aggression when people look to break in, and various things like that. and we set targets for ourselves that are either unrealistic or wrong for ourselves, and we tend to treat relationships with absolute disrespect, and so I've got a saying that I use often, which is that sometimes it takes us to actually hit a brick wall before we'll come to and understand that actually there's a bit more to life than what we thought there was. And you know, that's why I'm able to say to people when they ask me, and again it sounds a bit bizarre, I'm actually really glad I had testicular cancer, because it's shown me a different way of life. It's shown me how I can be happy, because there is nothing, I promise you, there is nothing like the words of thanks from somebody who you've helped in a small way. You know, just by a little bit of information here, or you know, just by helping them understand what their child is going through. It's so rewarding that, you know, actually for all the skills I possess, I don't use them now. You know, I'm a computer engineer, I'm a network engineer for schools, and I don't want to do it. All I want to do is help people, and that's what I do.
Yes. Not in a way where I woke up one morning and thought, I've had cancer, I must change my life. But things changed, and then I began to think back and think, maybe that's where that came from. 13 years ago, when I was diagnosed, I worked in publishing, and I worked in a little office with 3 other people, editing plays, 1 or 2 phone calls a day. I was really not connected to the world. And 13 years on, I'm teaching adults with learning difficulties, which is the hands-onest thing with other people I think I could imagine me doing. You know, dealing with people all the time, people who need your nurturing as well as your educational skills, whatever. So it's a bit like, although I've never wanted kids, there was a bit of me that thought I need to do something where I can show a bit of care for people, a bit of nurturing for people, and be a bit of a parent. Would that have happened if I hadn't had the cancer? I don't know, but I think it did. I think there was definitely a change that I wanted to get out of my little ivory tower and get out and surround myself with people. So I think, yes, it has changed my outlook on life. I couldn't tell you how. I couldn't actually chart the steps, but I'm convinced that, yes, that's where it started.
Other people have described it as making them less selfish. Do you think that's an accurate observation from your experiences?
I feel a less selfish person, or certainly that my life is less self-involved. One of the things about writing, hanging in there, was I wanted to write a play because I wanted to spread the message and I wanted to make some money for charity. And I'm not the sort of person to jump out of a plane or play a rugby game or do a bungee jump or anything like that, or run somewhere. So I did what I do, which is I wrote a play. But I'd never written a play that had any purpose to it beyond being a play. The fact that it's a play that's become a film, that is spreading a message, that is making money for charity, that's involved all these people who are doing it maybe to be in a film, but also to be involved with something that's kind of life-changing and getting a good message out there. That's really good. It's I've kind of lost the thread. Sorry. But yeah, I definitely feel, yes, less selfish, but more involved with the world and other people and doing good in the world as well.
And I think from watching some of the film being shot today, I mean, I'm a cancer survivor myself, and there were familiar threads running through all the scenes I saw. And I know that some people express themselves through blogs, or sometimes they express themselves through anger. And obviously you've used your talents to actually do what a lot of other people are doing by either jumping out of planes or spreading the word, running campaigns about awareness of testicular cancer in particular. In fact, I was talking to the lead actor who was saying he had no idea that testicular cancer was one of the biggest problems for 18 to 35-year-olds, if you're talking about cancers, because he'd automatically thought that cancer was something that older people would get,
right,
and hadn't realised that this was something that people of 18. Nobody had mentioned it at school, nobody had mentioned it anywhere else. And so by doing this, one of his wishes is to help educate those people who are watching it. Because as he said by his own admission, he knew nothing about it before.
That's really good. To know that someone's actually learned something through doing it. Again, yeah, that's me having cancer and taking that beyond me, which makes me feel a better person. In some, I'm trying not to sound too American miniseries about it, but yeah, you just think, I'm doing something that means something to people. Just you mentioning the breast cancer, at the beginning of Hanging In There, he gets into checking his balls because he finds his wife doing a breast check.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, there's no doubt that given a second chance, that I'd like to think I've grabbed it with both hands. My whole outlook on life has changed. Yes, I still get stressed, but I think it puts in perspective. I always think about what happened. I never question, why was it me? In some ways now, coming through it, I look at it as a positive, as a strength. And yeah, I mean, there's things that I've done since that I would never have done had I not been ill. So it gave me an opportunity to travel and adventure and do challenges and raise money. And I think that had I never been ill, more than likely these things would never happen. So certainly it's changed my life, and absolutely. Now it's in the past.
Beautiful.
And I can look back on it, and it's for the better.
Definitely stronger than I thought I was. A lot more confident. Made friends out of it as well, who I regard as brothers, fellow survivors. And just taught me a lesson that life's too short. Yeah, I did my first extreme obstacle course race last year. I've got another one coming up in May. I've also done a half marathon. I'll do testicular cancer awareness online on Facebook and Twitter. And I've spoken to lads who are going through it and say, look, it seems really bad now, but you're going to get through it, you are going to make a full recovery.
I think you value things a lot more in life. If you see something that, I've been watching things from the International Space Station, you really, really, appreciate where you're from, your surroundings, the people around you. I tend to make a point of trying to keep in touch with people a lot more, see how they are. The world doesn't revolve around me. Everyone else has got their own lives, but you open the door and you see how each person's life is going on and how they're getting on. I suppose I've always done that in a little way, but more so now. I just make sure that I know that everyone in my life is okay, and whether we're not in touch or not, I keep in touch with them, more frequently, just to see that they're doing okay, And if they say yes, that's it, that's fine. I'll leave them for 2 or 3 months and check again. You don't take things for granted so much, but I have tried not to let it change me too much. I have to live with certain things from the treatment, tinnitus, which people look at me and if walking along the street, no one would know I'd ever been as ill as I was. But it certainly changes your outlook. I've done things I probably wouldn't have done had I not been ill. Like jump out of a plane, for example. I probably have never done that.